around MRT. First is you mentioned in the slide that one of the ways to generate funds and income is to develop the land around MRT. So does that mean in the land acquisition you are actually acquiring more than what's needed for the MRT? That's one. I mean, of course, I would prefer the government of the MRT to minimize the land acquisition from the developer's point of view. And the second question is, after acquiring, is it on the table? Is it a plan to work with the landowners to develop the land? Is that possible? If so, what's the channel for landowners to actually approach SPAT or anyone else in this partnership or JVs? Thanks.
Okay, let me clarify and allay some fears. Actually, what we mean by capitalizing on development along the MRT alignment is not acquiring private land for development. That one, if it's already in private hand, we let private developers do it. What we're focusing on is on government land. Right now, there are plenty of government land underutilized, not being used for purposes that will realize its full value, considering its location. And if MRT runs by it, the value, the potential for it increases. And if it still serves as a workshop, for instance, it will be a waste. So our intention is to identify government land that is being used for purposes that could be done elsewhere, and use that for property development. So I guess I suppose that answers your second question as well. So if it's private land, we won't acquire the mandatory Land Acquisition Act. Will be left for private developer to do it. Therefore, the landowner can do whatever he or she pleases.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Mohd Nur Ismal. I'm the presenter for the Abu TV, the Abu Dhabi-based Islamic Financial News Network. And most importantly, I'm the daily user of the public transport here in Malaysia.
Good for you.
To be honest, not really. Anyway, we've gone off. We've seen. I've known Firdaus for a long time, for almost a decade now, and we lived together in England for a long time. So we know. And for me, unfortunately, I have a phobia of driving, so I need to completely depend on the public transport. So since I got back to Malaysia, a lot of friends who are still in the UK, they really want to come back to serve Malaysia. And one of the problems is the public transport itself. And I have a lot of questions actually. The first one is the short-term solution. As Malaysian, we are quite well traveled actually, in compare with a lot of other Western countries. We do know that in even some underdeveloped countries like in Jakarta, like Indonesia, or in Bangkok as well. I mean, it has been served. I mean, the public transport is pretty good, you know. And I've been told that in Jakarta they have the proper BRT system where they can catch a lot of commuters, and it really works for a country that has a lot of population. Okay, the short-term solutions that are cost-wise, and the second one is the KTM. I remember that the KTM bought some trains back a couple of years ago from China, and it was bought, and the rail tracks was not. It doesn't commensurate the one that we have in Malaysia, and it was quite a waste. And this is KTM, Tapi Tanah Melayu. I mean, it is under your jurisdiction. I mean, who to blame for that? Because otherwise we would have a really good expansion of a new set of tracks and train in Malaysia. That is the KTM problems, and this is the third one.
If you can just keep it to two, and then maybe we can take questions later after.
Okay. another one is the taxi. Okay. As you know, the taxi drivers and taxi, what do you call it? The taxi in Malaysia is a national disgrace. Okay. I was quite, what do you call it? Disappointed often, you know, because my mother also uses public transport, and we had a lot of problems. And visitors that come to Malaysia, there's a lot of problems in getting complaints and making complaints that and work on their complaints. It's been so many times that I've been let down by this service. And how do you address that? Because we're becoming to the 2012 now, and something needs to be done.
Okay, so kindly, you have 3 questions again.
Repeat again.
Yeah, repeat in short.
Okay. The first one is the short-term solution.
Yeah.
Okay, actually I have another question in mind. I don't know. Okay, the first one is the short-term solutions. The second one is the KTM. The third one is the taxi, and the fourth one is actually the monorail. Because as you said, you want to be cost-wise, we have to be low. What about our countries has their own train companies that actually doing quite well in Brazil and India, as for engineering, and they actually give better options in terms of cost. Have you looked into that proposal? Okay, that's the 4 questions.
Thank you. Maybe in the spirit of YCM, before Mr. Mohd Nur Ismal answers the 4 questions, maybe in the spirit of YCM, I'm going to take questions on your career and Mr. Mohd Nur Ismal's journey down his career path next, okay? Other than MRT.
Career.
So we'll get back to MRT after that. So anyone with a career type question after this?
I'm actually more comfortable talking about transport.
Do you have any age limit on the appointment of new staff?
For YCM, I think maybe pronounce the answer like this.
Okay, let me start with the 4 questions. In terms of short-term solutions, unfortunately, in public transport there is no short-term solution. The shortest term we're talking about is 6 months to 2 years to deliver.
2 years.
And that actually is covered under NKRA government transformation program, which I was involved in. That's the major crux was on. But the thing is that our problem is that many of outside of rail, many of the services are run by private companies and individuals. And the licensing regime that was put in place before this was parked under entrepreneurial ministry, and the focus was on building entrepreneurs, not on providing public transport services. So that's the dilemma that we're in. We cannot just simply put in regulations and get rid of these people overnight. Although I like to, but I can't. This applies especially mainly to taxis, to stage buses, to express buses. This will require a bit more time, political will, and solid business cases to restructure the whole industry. And we are looking at that. Why we started with MRT is because MRT, even though it takes 5-6 years to build, but to get it off the ground is really quick. But to restructure buses where some of the operators are like real gangsters, to conceive a plan that everybody can live with takes longer than planning for MRT. But the solution will be quicker. So that's why we started with something that takes shorter time to plan and then give it to somebody else to build, and then we shift our attention to coming up with solving problems in other areas such as buses and taxis. And we are putting together a plan because the problem is that because we have this multiple personality disorder. On one hand, we want to keep fares low. On the other hand, we give licenses to too many people. So we have too many transport providers running around looking for the same number of customers, while the fares have not kept up for the last 10, 20 years. But when we tell them, why, if you lose money, why do you stay in business? Why do you want to still run bus services? They say that's all they know. You know, this is something that they've been doing and they are passionate about. So I can't really force them out of business until I can show the migration path forward. Until I can show how people would voluntarily allow themselves to be acquired so that industry can be consolidated. In a sense, very similar to what Bank Negara did with our banks. If you notice, a few years ago, we have many small banks that could not compete. And it took them years in order to consolidate so that you can have 4 or 5 strong banks. And we are trying to do the same with public transport. In Klang Valley alone, we have 14 bus operators. One, which is Rapid KL, controls half the market. The others scattered all over the place. We need to find a way so that we can consolidate these people and they thank us for it. That's the difficult part. Because, you know, we cannot afford to appear to be victimizing people, especially operators. But we know that we cannot victimize the public. So we're trying to address this holistically in terms of how the industry should move forward, how the fare should be structured, how services should be provided. There will be service level, these operators will be provided some time to bring up their service levels to meet the service level requirements. And if they fail, then they will be glad to hand the company for consolidation. Because we meet it harder. Because if you notice, we are now requiring all service providers, all operators to re-register. We are shifting from a vehicle-based permits to operator-based licenses. With this scheme, with this regime, operators will be a lot more accountable. They cannot simply say, oh, I don't control the drivers. They can do whatever they want. No more. Because the license is tied to the operator.